everybody. Welcome back to our show. I am very delighted to have Paul Graziano with us. Some call him Paul Revere. Why is he called Paul Revere? It's because he's been putting community boards and local civic organizations on high alert. His message is, the developers are coming. The developers are coming to tear down your homes and replace them with apartment houses. What is this alert about? It's a plan by our dear Mayor Adams to tear down small outer borough communities in order to allow the largest New York City developers to build high-rises in their place in the outer boroughs. In the name of right-sounding words, foster vibrant neighborhoods. Doesn't it sound beautiful? Relocate small businesses so they can be near their customers. Create gentle density and missing middle housing. Oh yes, build housing that is more affordable. Watch out, when you hear that word affordable, watch out. They are calling this zoning package the City of Yes. People listen to the bright-sounding words. They don't think, what does it mean? They are blinded by its brightness. They only hear hope. They do not research into what has already happened when those bright-sounding words have been put into effect. Today, Paul Graziano is going to help us find out what those bright-sounding words actually mean. Ask itself, what is missing? Are there any plans to support the relocated public? To support the relocated public?
Well, again, the public that they are thinking of is the public that is going to sell to developers. So they are going to self-relocate, right? They're going to sell their home and move and get their money and walk away and go somewhere else. And in the meantime, the communities are going to change very quickly when that happens. Not only because of the density, but because the population turnover will be very fast. In terms of other things, so let me give you an example. There's a move to demolish the public housing in Chelsea right now. Thousands of units of public housing, and replace it with market rate mixed use. So it'll be mixed use public and market rate housing. And the city wants to essentially privatize all public housing in the city of New York. To do this, in some cases, they will build on all of the green spaces that exist in these places. So the one benefit that a lot of these places have is a lot of green space. They're sort of, we call it tower in the park, right? They've got a 12 or 15-story building, and then they've got acres of green space. This is all going to be what's called campus infill. They will be able to build giant buildings on the green spaces, and those will be market rate housing. That will not be affordable housing or public housing.
Will those developers be allowed to manage the public housing so they can,
yes,
say, make the repairs and then get the people out because they can't be there while the repairs are being made?
There is also a move, and this started under the de Blasio administration, to privatize public housing or have them managed privately. Now, this is partially because NYCHA, to be honest, has been a complete disaster. But to replace that with private for-profit is not necessarily a good route either. So what is the solution? That's a little bit above my pay grade. I am unfortunately not an elected official, but the first thing I would do is fund NYCHA correctly. The problem is NYCHA is $12 billion in the hole. That's because they cut off funding to NYCHA 30 years ago. They took out the money that was it. A lot of public housing was actually very well maintained until the 1990s. In fact, lots of people clamored to go to public housing because the private housing that they were living in was terrible. And the public housing was newer and better maintained. It all started going downhill, really downhill, in the 90s, when the federal government and the state government started starving NYCHA. And that's why we have a $12 billion maintenance backlog, let alone billions of other dollars that need to go in there. But that specifically was a very specific move by the government to do that. Same thing with rent-stabilized apartments. I mean, these are government decisions that are now coming decades later, and their response is, well, the only way we can fix this is by destroying all of these other communities and increasing density and allowing developers to do whatever they want.
Yes, the concept of starving the beast is a very prevalent one in government.
It's a very prevalent, particularly in and I'll say, in conservative circles.
Yes.
And there is an argument to be made that there is government waste and there's certainly a lot of government corruption. But at the end of the day, it's our tax dollars, right? We are paying for this stuff. The question is our tax dollar, are they being used wisely? Are they being used for the public and common good? Or are they being used to enrich people at the expense of the common good? And that is one of the biggest problems. I mean, I know we're going a little far afield here, but it's all connected. It's all connected with each other. So, you know, one of the things that we have said is maybe it's come to a point, and we can talk about this in a little bit, that the 125-year experiment of New York City may be coming to a bit of an end because we have disparate needs in disparate communities, and this is trying to be, the decision makers are Manhattan-heavy, urban people, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but with a very specific point of view, who are trying to push their vision of this throughout the rest of the city.
They have different needs.
Well, they have different needs, and they have different needs and wants, and they also have a different ideology and philosophy that doesn't really match the reality of what the rest of the city is. And I think that that's part of it as well, is that there's a real divide here, and it may be coming to a point where certain communities are ready to leave the city. And it's not just Staten Island. You know, everybody's, oh, Staten Island, they want to leave. It's not just Staten Island, it's everywhere. It's really quite something, and we can talk more about that if you wish.
Yeah, we have a big problem about, even if there's government waste, the point is this tax dollars are still going to government.
Correct.
So even if you cut funding on X, Y, Z, the fact that the tax money is going somewhere.
One of the amazing things that I found, I had to bone up on this. 1/3 of the city is owner occupied. 1/3. 2/3 are renters. The vast majority of owner occupied housing is in the low density parts of the city. The areas that they want to, that are focused on destruction. That the city has, they have stated, quote unquote, low density areas are the cause of the housing crisis. This is directly from the Department of City Planning. The zoning we have is racist. Tell that to the African American and Afro-Caribbean communities in the Bronx, in Brooklyn, in Queens, who all fought like hell to get their 1- and 2-family homes in their neighborhoods, as well as other communities around the city. And Northeast Queens, where I live, which is primarily Asian and white or Hispanic communities in the Bronx, in Brooklyn, and Staten Island, it's just not true. It's just another lie that, I'll say it straight out, it's a lie that's being used for political propaganda by this mayor and the Department of City Planning. Okay. When you have 1/3 of the city is owner occupied, we are the stakeholders. We are the primary stakeholders, the 1- and 2-family homes, co-ops, and condos of the city. We are the stakeholders. We are paying 1- and 2-family homes the largest portion of property taxes in the city of New York. And the city is telling us we don't deserve to exist. So again, we're funding the very government that is trying to make an extinction event for us. So that's why I say it's not just Staten Island, it's not even just Queens. It's huge parts of Brooklyn, it's huge parts of the Bronx, that the city is going on a trajectory where they are ready to leave the city. They're not ready to sell their homes. They're ready for their communities to walk away from the city. And this, I've never heard this before in my life.
Is it even organizing?
Yes, this is already happening. There are bills that have been introduced in Albany. Every community group I've spoken to, I've done 105 presentations since November across the city. There has not been a single organization or group that I have met with where at the end of my meeting, and I say to them, given what you know, if you had your choice for your neighborhood to stay in New York City or become its own town, which would you prefer? There has not been a single one that said, oh, I want to stay in the city. And this is, again, these are in dense neighborhoods as well as suburban neighborhoods in the city. These are people who are tired of being forced into situations where they had some self-governance, and this is all being taken away from them by this mayor and the previous mayor to some extent, but this mayor even more, and the Department of City Planning and the Department of Transportation and all of these other agencies that are just trying to ram things through against the will and wishes of the people who live there. And again, you don't have to take my word for it. Go to these communities. Go to Cambria Heights, Queens, where 2 months ago, I will tell this quick story. I was on a Zoom with the Cambria Heights Civic Association. This is a one-family neighborhood it is the bastion of the black middle class in New York City on the Nassau County border. 220 people were on that Zoom. I showed the city of yes to them. And at the end of the Zoom, people started writing in the chat box. And the first question was, so what does the mayor think of this? And I said, this is the mayor's plan. And the next response was, what? No, wait, he's from here. He's a homeowner. I said, what does that have to do with anything? Then you started seeing people write, one-term mayor, and a lot of other things that I won't mention. A week and a half later, I got a text from the head of a guy named Warren Schreiber, who's the president of the Queens Civic Congress. The Queens Civic Congress is an umbrella organization that represents about 75 or 80 homeowners and civic organizations around the borough. We are the oldest group in the city that does this, and we've been doing it for 50, 60 years. So we're very organized in Queens in a way that Manhattan neighborhoods always fight amongst themselves or only care about their own little geographic area. We all work together, because in strength, there are numbers. He texted me and said, hey, there's this woman who wants to do an event on the city of yes in Cambria Heights. Can you give her a call? I said, sure. I called this person, and her name was Alicia. I said, oh, hey, Alicia, Paul Graziano. I told blah, 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 blah. I said, I'd like to volunteer if I can help you with this. And she said, Mr. Graziano, I have something I need to tell you. I love you. I was on the City of Yes Zoom with Cambria Heights Civic. You opened my eyes. And she and her cousin, who are both in their 60s, went with a flyer they made up and hit 3,000 houses in 3 days. And 950 people showed up to that meeting that I presented at the Cambria Heights Library branch of the Queens Public Library. It is on YouTube. Anybody can go to my YouTube page. You will see the incredible anger from this community, as well as all of the other communities that I've spoken to, that the city would try to impose destroying their communities to help developers. I mean, nakedly. And say that that the zoning we have is racist. I was asking this, again, 100% African American and Afro-Caribbean community. Do you think your zoning is racist? Hell no, is the response. Well, your mayor and the Department of City Planning, they're telling you that your zoning is racist. And some of your council members are saying this too. So this is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with an existential crisis in this city, where the city powers are literally trying to destroy communities across the city. For whom? What is the purpose? It's not to help people.
It's to make a certain group richer.
Correct.
Billions are not enough.
That's it.
Amazing. Oh, God.
It's a lot.
Yeah. Paul, my audience, please ask yourselves, what's happening to small businesses in Manhattan? What's happening to small businesses?
I mean, we've seen, not just in Manhattan, we've seen small businesses going out of business all over the place. Why? The rent is too damn high, right? That's one of the major reasons that businesses are small, locally owned small businesses. But we're even seeing big chains go out of business. We're seeing all the pharmacies go out of business. Why?
Because of all the theft.
Correct. Not because they can't pay the rent, but because of the theft that the city and the state refuse to deal with, right? We have small businesses going out of business because of crazy stuff going on as well, where they just can't take it anymore. I have a friend who will remain nameless who owns a business down in Chinatown. A few weeks ago, the police came and said, "Do you have any video footage of the murder that happened in front of your building last week?" I mean, to me, this is crazy, right? We're going right back to the 1990s where there was just madness going on between mentally ill, drug addiction, and random violence. Much more random than we ever had.
Yes.
We also have, again, we have a capitalist society where the landlords determine the price of the rent.
And if they don't rent it, they take it off their income tax.
Correct. They take a capital gains loss, and that's the end of it for them. Right, and that goes for landlords of residential units as well. So we have a system that benefits a certain class of people at the expense of everybody else. And I mean, I can tell you, people have, in downtown Flushing, which is a crazy place, if you ever go there, it is a wild place. People are renting shoebox-sized places for $30,000 a month. And that's for retail. I'm
How
saying.
does anyone make $30,000 a month rent? Wow.
Yeah. And then they have to pay their employees, then they have to pay for all of their supplies and materials. They have to be clearing, just to break even, they have to be clearing at least $50,000 a month for these businesses. So, yeah, and that's like that here too. I mean, same thing. Again, my friend would have to be clearing at least $500,000 a year to cover his basic rent and his employees and his expenses.
Like insurance, for instance.
So, and sure, there are plenty of businesses doing that, but there's lots of businesses that fail. I mean, it's sad. It's a sad situation. And so many of the things that we think of as unique in New York, you know, there's so many other cities where their retail is doing so much better than we are because the landlords are not charging crazy rents for people. It's this city. This city is very specific.
When you can take your a write-off from your taxes, where's the encouragement to charge a reasonable rent?
Correct. Yeah, I mean, we are what we call a world city. There's only a certain number of them. London is one of them, New York, Tokyo, Rio de Janeiro. There's a number of cities that are in Mexico City. We're sort of in this mega city character. The rents in Tokyo are much cheaper, and they have a much better quality of life. And in fact, their actual rent for living is also much cheaper, much more affordable than New York.
What is the plan to find solutions for migrants, increased homelessness, and the mentally ill in Manhattan and beyond? What is Mayor Adams' plan to mitigate all of this? Who will be the winners? Who will be the losers?
So, the migrant issue. The migrant issue and the homelessness issue are tied. We have something in our city charter, very specifically, which sets us apart from any other city in the United States. It states, according to the lawyers who got this dealt with in terms of the lawsuit about 40 plus years ago, that anyone requesting housing must be given housing. I have never heard of this in any other place, let alone in the world, in the United States. So we are at a distinct disadvantage where we must accommodate people who come seeking housing, whether they are homeless folks who are from New York, homeless folks who move to New York because we have this, or migrants who move here because they know that they have to be supplied with this housing. We have a self-created problem. Another major thing.
Wasn't it the result of a lawsuit?
It was the result of a lawsuit.
I forget that.
It was back in the early 80s. Correct. That's right. And again, another reason why people are rethinking, neighborhoods are rethinking their relationship with the city of New York. Because frankly, if, Whitestone, Queens were its own town, it wouldn't be abiding by this rule. They wouldn't have to supply housing for anybody who wants to come, or St. Albans for that matter. Or, for example, and this is a big issue, in downtown Jamaica. Downtown Jamaica has 23 homeless shelters, which is crazy. Okay, it's a big issue. Well, a lot of those homeless shelters had local homeless people, meaning families that had lost their housing or long-term housing, but they were from the community. They had relationships with people in the community. Well, in the last year, most of those people were literally spirited out in the middle of the night and sent to other homeless shelters around the city, and migrants were put into their place.
Cute.
Yes, and this has made no small consternation of the folks who live there. Think about this. You're from this community. You're in a homeless shelter because you're down on your luck. But you're from that community. You have family in that community. Your kids go to school in that community. Now all of a sudden, you've been sent up to the North Bronx. It's a 3-hour commute for your kid to get to school, or for you to see your family, or for you to deal with anything like that on the subway and the buses. How does the city operate like this? Because this isn't about homeless people, and it's not about migrants. It's about contracts. Back to the same thing we talked about. Public money. Before the de Blasio administration came into the city, we still had a lot of homeless people in this city, over 30,000 homeless people. The amount spent on the homeless was under $500,000. Today, the amount spent on the homeless is over $3 billion. It has become an industry. It is an industry, and friends and colleagues and connected people have gotten these contracts. One of them was for the debit cards for the migrants. You might have heard about that. I forget the not GoPro, but it was something like that. GoDoc. That was what it was, or DocGo. DocGo was the name of it. It was a $36 million contract, not to even give money, but to be the people to take the money and put it on debit cards and give it to the migrants. This is crazy. So when you have a situation where the city is just hemorrhaging money to ostensibly help people who need it, but at the same time don't help the people who need it, and at the same time create chaos for the regular people in the city, right? The people who just are going, who live and are doing everything they need to do and pay their bills and pay their rent and pay their mortgages. It's not a good system. Why wouldn't communities around the city not want to remove themselves from the city if we have a situation like this? Now, the mentally ill is a separate issue.
And by the way, a lot of people are afraid to go into the shelters because the mentally ill are in the shelters.
And many mentally ill don't want to go in the shelters as well. They don't want to be in a confined space. They don't also, it's in their mental illness to stay outside.
I see.
That is also true. I like to say I'm not an expert on mentally ill, but I am the son of a social worker.
Okay.
And so I certainly have had, call me social work adjacent, okay? The mentally ill, we all know what happened in the 70s when Geraldo did his big expose on Willowbrook. Okay, that was in, I believe, 1973 or something like that. I was just like a little kid at the time. But that set the standard to change the entire system of mental health care. Because no longer could you warehouse mentally ill in giant buildings, whether it's Randall's Island or Creedmoor in Queens or Willowbrook in Staten Island, Kings County Psychiatric. No more. So the answer was, mentally ill people are people too. We must allow them all the rights of regular people. Well, in theory, that sounds great. The problem is when mentally ill people are violent and mentally ill people cannot control themselves. Should they have the same rights as other people? It's a tough call, especially when they may actually kill someone or really hurt them.
Or push them off the...
Or push them off. Hey, this is what I'm saying. Unpredictability,
yes.
Not connected to social norms, not connected to any possible way to control their activity. It's a problem. So what is the solution? Is the solution to say, well, we can't do anything about it until they kill someone? We can't do anything about it until they shove someone off a platform? There has to be a better way to do this. This is not the way to do this. This is not the way to do any of this. The Adams administration has done little, probably more than the de Blasio administration did on this. There has been more, like for example, well actually I have to say that was the governor who flooded the subway with the National Guard, which, I don't know if that was the right thing to do, but the problem, part of the problem is the police have their hands tied. The police have their hands tied. And it's a very difficult situation when public safety cannot conduct public safety. It's a real problem.
Yeah. Mr. Graziano, would you please go through some brief definitions and descriptions of each part of the city of Yes?
Right. The ones I've already mentioned, I'll just briefly refresh.
All right.
Yes.
This has been worked on by the zoning board for many years. Anyway, accessory dwelling units.
So again, accessory dwelling units are a basement, a cellar, an attic, a addition to a house, a garage conversion, or a new house behind your house.
Could be an add-on to an add-on to an add-on.
Yes, I mean, they still want to have quote-unquote limits, but it's still going to be an additional unit in a home, period.
Could be many additional units.
Well, they're saying only one, but still.
Unless it's not written.
Right, well, again, that's illegal units, absolutely.
Town center zone.
So again, town center zoning would be for all lower density parts of the city, what we call commercial overlays. So these are the areas where commercial activity is allowed by law, where you can have a retail store, you can have a strip mall, you can have a building with, however many stories is allowed in that particular zone. It will allow two to 4 stories of residential above commercial at the ground level.
And is this what's described as missing middle?
Yes, this and the transit-oriented development, which is the next piece, which again, that would be in any area which is mapped, and they have these maps that I've already looked at, that are within a half-a-mile radius of any Long Island Railroad, Metro North, or subway station. And it covers huge swaths of Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx, and Staten Island. Enormous portions of it, particularly the 1 and 2 family areas where this would be most likely an outcome where a 1-family home or 2-family home is torn down and replaced with an apartment building.
I have to thank you so much for coming on our show, and you really have educated the general public.
Thank you.
This is Speak Up. This is Sandra Shelby. Till next time, goodbye.